Carrie Miller. Let's take a question. I got to see a question from Carrie Miller. We're going to take that one as our Carrie Miller, our first question. JB, did you see the new GNB 8S HighVolt 1300 milliamp hour? What kV do you think we should use? Carrie, it's impossible to answer that question because you didn't tell me what prop you're using. So in order to answer the question, what kV should you use? So you've identified correctly one of the three things you need to know to select your motor kV. Technically, there are four, but I think there are three main ones. And that is, one, you need to know the battery voltage, because battery voltage times kV equals motor RPM. Okay, that's how it works. The motor will attempt to make the RPM of kV times battery voltage. Now, it won't succeed at that because when there is a load on the motor, there's friction, there's air resistance and so forth. The motor doesn't spin to its full no load RPM, but that's the beginning of the equation. But then the next question is, how many RPM do you want? And that's defined in large part by the prop you've got. So, a 2-inch prop. A 2-inch prop with a 2S battery, a round number is 10,000 kV is a good round number. I remember that. Aaron Ciotti told me that once upon a time, and I'm able to remember it because 2 inches, 2S, 10,000, very round numbers. Now, if you take a 10,000 kV motor and a 2S battery and you put a 4-inch prop on it, it's going to be overpropped. It's going to be trying to spin too fast. At some point, the tip of the prop exceeds the speed of sound, and then very bad things happen. So, what kV should we use? Well, another way to approach that question is to say, let's go over here. Another way to approach that question is to say, let's say I've got a 5-inch prop, okay? Now, for a 5-inch prop, a good rule of thumb is that on 6S, you want between 1700 and 1900 kV. Okay? So let's say we would normally fly 1900 kV on 6S with a 5-inch prop. And now we're going to go to 8S because I don't know why you would do that, but okay. What you can do is you can take 8/6 and find the ratio of your new battery voltage to your old battery voltage. Okay? And then, so that's 1.3. So if we would fly with an 1800 kV motor on 6S, divide by 1.33333, we should fly with a 1350 kV motor on 8S to get exactly the same RPM at the prop. We've just gone up in voltage. And you could go the other direction as well. So that's one way to look at it. So you said 1300 milliamp hour 8S. So how many watt hours is that? How big of a battery is that actually? 8S times 3.7 volts times 1300, that is a 38 watt hour battery. So that's a significantly bigger battery than a typical 5-inch battery. A typical 5-inch battery might be something like 22 or 23 watt hours. 38 out of 23. That is a 65% bigger battery than a typical battery. So based on that, I'm going to guess that the weight of your battery, we'll go back here, 65%, let's say a typical 22 watt hour battery for a 5-inch quadcopter is about, say, 180, 190 grams. So let's say, Mike, multiply that by times 190 grams. Your battery is going to be about 300 grams. Since your battery is 300 grams, a rule of thumb is that you can roughly double the weight of the battery to get the dry weight of the quad. That's a very, very rough rule of thumb, but that's a good guideline for sizing a battery. So I'm going to guess that your quad is about 600 grams, your battery is about 300 grams, and that means your quad is in the 900 to 1 kilogram range. I'm going to guess it's a 7-inch cruiser. Okay? So I'm guessing then that you've got 7-inch props. 7-inch props on 6S usually run about 1300 kV. We're going to 8S. So we'll divide by 1.33333. We should be at about 1,000 kV, 975 kV. Okay. Now, here's the big question. One of the problems with going to an oddball battery voltage is it's tough to find motors that are the optimal kV. So like if you look at 7-inch motors in the 28 to 30 millimeter size range, they're going to be all tailored for 6S generally. So they're going to be like 1300 or 1700 kV, something like that. And when you put that 8S on there, I mean, you might do better to have something closer to 1,000 kV, but all the 1,000 kV motors are made for 10-inch props. So you can run into issues like that. But what a lot of people would do is they just run 8S on a 1,300 kV motor and just rip balls with more power. That's also one way to do it. Carrie Miller points out that they're HighVolt. Oh, the HighVolt throws off my calculation of their size a little bit. HighVolt batteries. So I'm not a fan of HighVolt batteries. I think that HighVolt batteries, you overcharge them to 4.35 volts instead of 4.2 volts. And as a result, you get more milliamp hours out of the same weight. Okay? But it's a little bit of a myth. All those milliamp hours are that very initial voltage sag, and especially when the battery's under load, it will often just sag down, and I don't feel like you get as much improved flight time out of HighVolt batteries as it seems like you ought to on paper, and I think that their durability is less. So I wouldn't go out of my way to buy HighVolts in general. Should storage be, what's storage for a HighVolt? In my humble opinion, HighVolt battery, I would storage it at 3.8, just like a regular LiPo. In my humble opinion, the only difference with a HighVolt is that it's safe to charge to 4.35. The bottom and the storage, I think, is the same. I could be wrong, but that's what I do. Couldn't you just reduce the motor output limit on a 1300 kV motor? Yeah, absolutely. Reduce the motor output limit to, 6 out of 8, whatever that is. Reduce it by that %. At which point, why you run an 8S? Why don't you run an 6S? I don't know. Maybe there's a reason. But, yeah. If you undercharge a HighVolt, well, then you're going to just basically have a LiPo that you paid extra for. Which, that's silly. Don't do that. Also, wow. Oh, good point, Joseph Dahari. If you've got an 8S rated ESC and you put an 8S HighVolt on there, what are you sure it's rated for that voltage? You're really at a risk of blowing your ESC. Be careful. Be careful. I'm not sure I would risk that. All right. Great. That is a great opening topic. That was a fantastic question and a great discussion. And they really offset the incredibly weak opening of this live stream, for which I should be ashamed. And I am ashamed. Now, Uber Nerno asks, what about 1S batteries? Ah, now that's a different story. That's a different story. On 1S batteries, like tiny whoop batteries, you must overcharge them because you just need all the flight time you can get out of those tiny things. Just thrash them, ride them hard, put them to bed wet, and when they break their leg, send them off to the dog food factory, if you will, metaphorically. Tiny whoop batteries are in some ways sort of semi-disposable. Sure, they would last longer if you only charged them with 4.2 volts, and your flights would be short and boring. Just, you're going to overcharge all of them. 1S tiny whoop batteries, you need them. But by the time you're up in the range of an 850 or 1000 milliamp hour, yes, you will get longer flight times if you overcharge. Simple physics. But I don't think you really have to need that extra 10 or 15% flight time to overcharge. Like racers. Racers are known for overcharging packs. When they're trying to qualify, a racer who has to get whatever 4 laps in 2 minutes or 6 laps in 2 minutes, they absolutely need, and they're finishing the qualifying laps with their battery sagging out 3.1, 3.0, 2.8, barely making it across the finish line. Those racers are so on the edge that they do need that tiny bit of extra performance that you get by overcharging. And that's why racers are known for overcharging, even regular lipos. Sometimes excessively overcharging to dramatic, fiery results. But for a typical person, I mean, I think what happens is people see, oh my goodness, this is a 1200 milliamp hours 6S and it only weighs 140 grams. Amazing. Physics has been defeated. And it's not true. It's just marketing. The milliamp hours of a HighVolt are misleading, and I don't think you actually get the kind of performance. You're not going to get the same performance out of a 1200 milliamp hour HighVolt that weighs 140 grams and a 1200 milliamp hour regular battery that weighs 190 grams. You're not, those milliamp hours are not the same. Because some of those milliamp hours are the very initial voltage at the top of the battery. You know how your battery goes 4.2, 4.1, 4.0, 3.9, 3.85 holding, and then it plateaus. When you overcharge to 4.35, you get a little bit longer bump there at the beginning, but it's not in real use. I don't think it's that much of a difference.